You probably must by now gotten your cup of coffee, cup of tea, or a pot of your pepper soup, whichever case it may be right now, because the conversation is about to begin on our major discussion for tonight, everyone. President Muhammadu Buhari has signed a 2019 budget into law, and it says the changes made to the 2019 budget estimate by the National Assembly will adversely impact the economic recovery growth programs. The president reveals this after signing the budget into law at the ceremony in the Asarok Villa, Abuja. The president, however, promises to engage the 9th National Assembly to address areas of concern where working to return the country to January to December budget cycle. The ceremony was attended by the leadership of the National Assembly and the members of the Federal Cabinet. It's perhaps obvious that the president was a bit reluctant about the signing due to the changes made to the budget. Take a look at some of the highlights as reflected in the signing and the speech of the president today. The president did talk about, he signed the budget. It's 6 months since he presented the budget to the National Assembly. He signed the budget into law. President raised concerns about cuts in the estimates sent to the National Assembly. He also raised issues on where the National Assembly added, where they're deducted, and he did say that changes will adversely impact on the government's programs and will also make it difficult to achieve the objectives of the economic growth recovery plan. The president also says that the addition of about 90 billion to what he presented to the National Assembly is a major one, and it will be difficult for the government to realize his set objectives. Let's get down to business tonight, and I have those who are in the know and can break it down for you. You don't need to get your calculator. They are here to break the issues down for you. I have joining me the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Muda Yusuf, and also the Principal Lead at BudgIT, Mr. Gabriel Okeowo. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Yusuf, you and I, we've discussed the issues of regularizing the budget cycle. Perhaps this is going to be the 4th year we've been talking about regularizing. This is one of the things the president did say. Before we go into the issues of budget cycle, how difficult is it for us to regularize the budget cycle? I know it might not be a problem because the existing budget or the 2018 budget is still covered because it wasn't signed quite in the beginning of the year, in January. But now, how difficult is it to regularize the budget cycle?
I think it's a function of the will of all the key stakeholders in the budgetary process. If they want to make it happen, it will happen. Because the major challenges with regard to the issue of the cycle of the budget has to do a lot with, first, the timing of the presentation of the budget. Secondly, the level of cooperation that the National Assembly gets from the executive. Because, we have seen budgetary sessions where the National Assembly complained bitterly about the fact that some key agencies of government were not coming forward to defend the budget. Thirdly, there is also the issue of the kind of relationship that exists between the National Assembly and the executive, which affects the level of communication and the level of understanding. Because one expects that even before the budget is presented, you have the MTEF, which form the basis for the budget, and that will have been approved even before the real budget is presented. So if you have an atmosphere of proper communication and mutual respect, I'm sure we'll be able to get around this issue of the budget cycle now becoming fluid and all of that.
Because it's a carryover.
It's a carryover.
From way back, as far as we can remember, we've always had this haphazard way of, our budget year does not respect the calendar, the yearly calendar.
No more calendar. In fact, with the legislation or the amendment to the law that was made, that the budget cycle now starts from the date that the budget is signed. So that is to make up for all this. But that is not a very tidy way, because it doesn't help planning, either on the government side or even on the private sector side. Because there is a way that even those of us in the private sector synchronize some of our activities to tally with what is happening in the public sector. Because really there is a lot of relationship and things that go with the
a
public
little
sector
bit
budget.
lopsided.
Exactly.
Mr. Okeowo, what is your takeaway from this budget? I know we've discussed some of the indices of this budget, but what has been signed by law into law, from your own point of view, is there anything like budget padding? If the president said, look, what I signed and what I presented, two different things. I'll come to Mr. Yusuf on the economic and growth plan. How difficult is it to implement what has been signed to law? Is there anything like budget padding from what the president has raised today?
Interestingly, this year's budget is one that the concept of budget padding wasn't flying around like we had in the previous year. And if we look at the difference between what the president proposed and what was now today signed into law, we are just looking at a difference of 90 billion naira compared to, if you want to look at 2018, what the president presented in 2018 and what was passed or and approved into law, we were talking about over 500 billion at that time, and that was a lot of money. Now with 90 billion, and yet president is still saying, right? For me now, each time I read the difference, the addition or the subtraction will make it difficult for the executive to implement. It's sounding to me like a rhetorics that we just need to include in a budget speech every year. I'm sorry.
But is it possible that in National Assembly, the president executive will present the budget to National Assembly and they wouldn't touch it? Add or reduce?
They are meant to review. If you are meant to review a document, a budget, review means you can cut, you can add, you can subtract.
But there is a school of thought which says that the National Assembly can reduce, but it cannot add.
Review.
That's a school of thought. That the National Assembly can reduce from the estimated figures, but it cannot add to it.
The question of whether they can add to it or not add to it will even come to place in what Mr. Yusuf said earlier about the harmony between the legislature and the executive. Now, they also by law have certain statutory right or allocation, what we call zonal intervention project that is under their jurisdiction. How well are these covered in what the executive presents to the National Assembly?
So you don't believe that
it is not well covered.
So you don't believe that for what happened today, the executive can find difficulty in implementation?
Really, let's look at the previous year. Let's look at how well they said the same thing last year in 2018. Now let's talk. Go and check the budget implementation of 2018.
What's the percentage?
The percentage as at what they released September 20 Q3 report was just about in revenue generation 39%, in recurrent expenditure 76%. Now in capital expenditure 17%.
Wow.
Yes.
Now I think in all of this, we need to relate to the Constitution because that is the guiding document.
Absolutely.
Both for the National Assembly and for the executive. And the Constitution says that no money shall be spent unless in accordance with what is appropriated by the National Assembly. So that confers a whole lot of powers
on the National
Assembly as far as appropriation is concerned. Because appropriation of the resources is one of the key functions of the National Assembly. We have been having this thing recurring year in, year out. I think it is very important and it's very necessary for us to have a judicial pronouncement on who has the final authority on the budget. Because if you are presenting to the budget to the National Assembly, and even the National Assembly even has the powers, if they have 2/3, to even pass the bill into law without the president. Yeah. So that underscores the enormity of the powers of the National Assembly. But in order to lay all these matters to rest, because it's becoming an annual thing, a recurring decimal. So we need to test this in the court of law. Yeah. How far exactly can the National Assembly go in tampering with the budget?
All right.
Those things are very important.
Let's take a pause. It does look to me like when you're giving your child money to go, for pocket money to go to school, he's the one spending the money, he's going to implement it, and you as the National Assembly is putting what the child says, I wouldn't need. Isn't it a problem there? We'll discuss more on that and what the president is saying and some of his concerns. That's going to be after the break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone. You heard the response of Yakubu Dogara, the House of Rep Speaker, to what the concerns of the president on this. Look, there are projects that the president did say were removed from the original presentation, about 6,000 or so of those projects. And he says the National Assembly added their own project, 90 billion naira difference. That's what the president says is captured in the budget. That he did mention that he reluctantly signed it so as not to slow down the economic recovery. So let's get back to the conversation now. Where do we go from here? It has been signed into law. The president has also preempted or speculated that there will be a supplementary budget. It does look like that will happen, or the federal government is planning a supplementary budget for 2019 to the 9th National Assembly when they resume. Okay. Let's get back to the conversation. Mr. Muda Yusuf is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Gabriel Okeowo is a lead partner at BudgIT. Thank you so much for your thoughts tonight.
Thank you very much.
A major one, when the president said 6,000 projects of the federal government has been removed, where the National Assembly had added that. Is it fair from your own point of view, Mr. Yusuf?
No, I don't think it's fair. The whole concept of the National Assembly reviewing the budget should not be taken to mean a total reconstruction of the budget. If the president is talking about 6,000 projects, that is substantial. It's really very substantial. And the executive has the authority and the responsibility, knowing what the capacity of government is, knowing what the limits of resources are, to actually define what projects should be implemented, to define the general priorities. I think they have a major responsibility in that respect. So if we are talking about tampering with over 6,000 projects, that is substantial. So I don't think that the National Assembly should go as far as that.
You probably think they have gone overboard?
I think so.
From the economic and economic recovery growth plan of the federal government and this budget, some of the figures that have come out of this budget, what do you make of this budget? Is it anything in line? Does it look like it can consolidate the economic standing of the nation?
No, you see, let me say this. We need to also moderate expectation from the budget, particularly from the federal government budget. The totality of this budget is 8.9 trillion. This economy is about 130 trillion. That's less than 10% of the GDP. So in terms of the materiality of what we even have on ground, it's not likely to make any significant impact. So and don't forget, when we talk about expenditure and projects, the state governments also have responsibilities in this area. That's what providing infrastructure, providing roads, building hospitals, building schools. The local government also have responsibility. So each time we talk about budget, we seem to focus only on the federal government. We should realize that other levels of government should also bring something to the table.
Again, we will focus on it when the Constitution has given the federal government too much powers. And you know how much of the roles and responsibility is given to the federal government in the Constitution.
How much is 8.9 trillion? In an economy
compared to other climes,
trillion.
Mr. Yusuf, compared to other climes, what percentage will make sense from our entire economy that our budget should be?
It should not be less than 25–30%.
So we should be seeing about 20 trillion budget for Nigeria.
Yes, exactly. And I think it can happen. It is possible if we get our priorities right, and if we also reform the economy in a way that those in the private sector were able to generate more investment, and through more investment, you can generate more revenue. I think if you have the right kind of reforms, you should be able to generate even more revenue than what we are generating now.
Interesting. Mr. Okay, we'll talk to the indices, the figures that we have now, the breakdown of those figures. What makes sense to you and what is out of line?
From our perspective, we want to wait till after tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Ministry of Budget and Planning have invited us for the budget presentation, where we are going to have access to what was really removed, what was added, what's the breakdown. Because from our part now, right, I'm not going to sit here and fault why certain projects were removed or not. Because we know that even when the budget was proposed, there were some items we consider frivolous that we did recommended to the National Assembly to look into those projects. So if some of what were removed are what citizens, Nigeria, considered frivolous or areas where budget scamming can happen, it is fine. But we'll wait till tomorrow. Let's wait till tomorrow. There is going to be a convergence in Abuja
part of
tomorrow.
it, we have an idea of what the debt part of it is looking like.
Yes.
Major sectors like the transport sector, the works, road construction sector, the housing sector, the power sector. From what is being estimated in that budget, are we going to see any major drive in some of these economic drivers?
Well, as usual, those are some of sectors that even take bulk of the budget when it comes to expenditure, when it comes to allocation. But there are some other critical sectors too that impact on the citizen. Yes, all sectors impact on the citizen, but there are some that impact on the development of the citizen, on the capacity of the nation, of the economy, of the private sector, of the people to generate resources, to generate, to catalyze the economy to the level that Mr. Yusuf just talked about. Yes, we should be looking at something not less than times 3 of what was presented today.
Right.
But if we look at the previous year, how well have we even done in implementing and working with what we have?
Let's talk about developmental issues now, quickly because of our time. Issues of education, health, those are fundamentals to human capital development. And a lot of people will say what we budget into it will show how serious we are. There's a United Nations standard, there is a WHO standard on how much should be budgeted for these areas. The federal government is focusing on this social intervention program and all of that. From what you have seen, Mr. Yusuf, on the budget and the estimate for some of these sectors, are we serious?
Well, I will say we are serious, but I'm not sure we are doing the right things in order to ensure that we have much bigger resources to drive this economy. Now, if you look at even the structure of the budget, 4.65 trillion is recurrent expenditure. 2.94 trillion is capital expenditure. 2.25 trillion is debt service.
Wow. That's half of the recurrent itself.
And if you even take the capital, if you take the capital component of the budget, the infrastructure component of that capital component is probably not more than half. And what this economy needs the most as we speak are issues of infrastructure.
But is it a crime to borrow?
Well, it is not a crime to borrow, but when you borrow and you have a budget where 70%
it's becoming a burden.
Yes, goes on recurrent. I mean, how will you get value from the borrowing?
And if
they've increased the wage now.
Yes, that will even shoot up.
It will shoot up
again. And if I'm going to comment on the question you asked about how serious are we in what is being allocated to key development sectors, right? I'm not going to talk from the perspective of allocation. I'm going to talk from the perspective of implementation.
Again?
Yes, over the years we have clamored for allocation. Let's even leave what was allocated.
All right.
How well as the little that was allocated have been implemented.
Final words, please. In 30 seconds, we need to go. Mr. Okeowo, this budget for you, what does it mean? Just in one sentence.
This budget is nothing special. We'll pick it up. We expect the nation to run, but there is expectation from Mr. President. Let Mr. President do something better. Let Mr. President drive the economy to generate more revenue.
Let's gain from your experience, Mr.
Well,
Yusuf.
we need to continue to engage the government. We need to push for policies that will expand this economy, because this economy can do much better than what we are doing now. And we need the right kind of policies, the right kind of institutions, the right kind of reforms for us to actually bring the economy to the level that it should be.
I must sincerely thank you. Well, that's the bit that we can have, and I must sincerely thank you for this conversation. If this is going to be taking, this is a consultation for free for the federal government and for the nation. But that's what we do. Many thanks to Mr. Muda Yusuf, the DG LCCI, and Mr. Gabriel Okeowo, our lead partner at BudgIT. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.